The space between us on the couch had shrunk to nothing. Jacqueline Mendoza sat so close I could smell the vanilla in her perfume, feel the warmth radiating from her bare shoulder. Her dark eyes held mine with an intensity that made my chest tight. "Tell me why you keep avoiding me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the moment I'd been dreading for weeks, the conversation I'd been running from every time she walked into a room. My roommate Samuel's older sister, the woman who'd been living in our apartment for 2 months while she figured out her next move after her divorce. The woman I'd fallen for despite every rational thought in my head telling me it was a terrible idea. "I'm not avoiding you," I lied, even as I fought the urge to lean away from her closeness. She tilted her head, studying me with those knowing eyes. "Louis Ruiz, you are a terrible liar." The way she said my full name made something flutter in my stomach. I'd never heard it sound so intimate before, like she was tasting each syllable. "You disappear every time I enter the kitchen. You take the stairs 2 at a time when you hear me coming down the hall. Yesterday, you literally turned around and walked the other direction when you saw me at the grocery store." Her fingers found mine on the couch cushion between us. "So I'm asking again, why are you avoiding me?" Before I could answer, before I could come up with another weak excuse, she leaned closer. Close enough that I could see the tiny gold flecks in her brown eyes. Close enough that when she spoke again, I felt her breath against my lips. "Because I think you feel it too." "Hello, my name is Louis Ruiz. I'm 29 years old. I work as a freelance carpenter, mostly doing custom furniture and home renovations around Portland. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment with my best friend Samuel James, who I've known since college. It's a good setup, a good life, or at least it was, until his older sister showed up at our door 2 months ago with 3 suitcases and eyes red from crying. I should back up and explain how we got to that moment on the couch, how I ended up falling for the one woman I absolutely couldn't have. It started on a Tuesday in September, one of those perfect Portland days when the air is crisp and the leaves are just starting to turn. I was in the workshop I'd set up in our garage, sanding down a dining table I'd been commissioned to build for a young couple in the Pearl District. The radio was playing something soft and folky, and I was lost in the rhythm of the work, the way the wood grain revealed itself under the sandpaper. It's meditative, woodworking. There's something about creating something beautiful with your hands that quiets all the noise in your head. That's when I heard Samuel's voice from the driveway, followed by a woman's laugh. Not his usual laugh, but something sadder, more fragile. I looked up to see him helping someone out of an Uber, pulling suitcases from the trunk. The woman was tall, maybe 5'7", with long dark hair that caught the afternoon light. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, and even from a distance, I could see the exhaustion in her shoulders. The way she held herself like she was carrying invisible weight. "Jackie, you remember Louis?" Samuel was saying as they approached the garage. "Louis, my sister Jacqueline. She's going to be staying with us for a while." I set down my sandpaper and wiped my hands on my jeans, suddenly aware of how I must look, covered in wood dust and wearing a ratty old flannel shirt. Jacqueline stepped forward with a small smile, extending her hand. "Thank you for letting me crash here," she said. "I know it's not ideal having someone's mess of a sister invade your space." Her handshake was firm, her palms soft but not delicate. There were calluses on her fingertips that made me curious about what she did with her hands. "It's no problem at all," I said and meant it. "Samuel's family is always welcome here." She held my gaze for just a moment longer than necessary, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Nothing dramatic, just a small recognition. Like when you hear a song you've never heard before but somehow know all the words to. "What are you working on?" she asked, nodding toward the table. "Dining set for a client, cherry wood with walnut inlays." I found myself wanting to show her, to explain the joinery technique I was using, the way I'd matched the grain patterns. "Do you want to see?" Samuel cleared his throat. "Maybe later, man. Jackie's had a long day. Let's get her settled first." As they headed toward the house, Jacqueline glanced back over her shoulder. "I'd like that," she said. "I've always been curious about woodworking." That first week, she was like a ghost in the apartment. I'd catch glimpses of her in the kitchen early in the morning, making coffee in an oversized sweater and bare feet. She'd smile and say good morning. but there was a distance in her eyes, like she was seeing something far away. Samuel filled me in on the basics. Jacqueline had been married for 6 years to a guy named Brandon Martin, a real estate developer who turned out to be both controlling and unfaithful. The divorce had been messy, expensive, and emotionally devastating. She'd been staying with friends in Seattle for a few months, but needed somewhere more permanent to figure out her next steps. "She's a photographer," Samuel told me one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. "Really talented, but Brandon never supported it, called it a hobby, said she should focus on being a proper wife instead." He shook his head in disgust. Guy was a complete narcissist. I never liked him. I found myself to thinking about her more than I should have. The way she hummed quietly while making coffee. The stack of photography books she kept on the coffee table. The fact that she always said thank you when I cooked dinner, even though I always made enough for 3 people anyway. It was during the second week that she started spending time in the garage while I worked. She'd bring a cup of coffee and sit on the old wooden stool I kept in the corner, watching me sand or cut or assemble. At first, she didn't say much, just observed with the same focused attention I imagined she brought to her photography. "You have good hands," she said one afternoon, watching me use a chisel to clean up a mortise joint. Steady, patient. I glanced up at her, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "Thanks, it takes practice." Brandon always said patience was overrated, that successful people move fast, made quick decisions. She was quiet for a moment. "I'm starting to think he was wrong about a lot of things. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. I'd love to know if anyone else has found themselves in an impossible situation like this one." The conversation stayed with me that night as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. There was something in her voice when she talked about her ex-husband, a mixture of anger and sadness and something else. Relief, maybe. Like she was slowly waking from a long, confusing dream. Over the next few days, our garage conversations became longer, more personal. She told me about her photography, how she'd started taking pictures in high school, and dreamed of becoming a photojournalist. She'd been good too, good enough to get into a prestigious program at the Art Institute. But then she met Brandon during her junior year, and he convinced her to transfer to a business program instead. More practical, he said, photography didn't pay the bills. She was sitting cross-legged on the stool, cradling a mug of tea. I was 21 and thought I was in love. I thought he knew better than I did. "Do you still take pictures?" I asked, running my hand along the smooth surface of a cabinet door I'd just finished. "Sometimes, mostly just snapshots on my phone now." She was quiet for a moment. "I sold my good camera to help pay for the divorce lawyer." Something about the way she said it, matter of fact but with an undertone of loss, made my chest ache. I wanted to tell her she should get another camera, that it wasn't too late to pick up where she left off. But I didn't know her well enough yet to say something like that. Instead, I asked, "What did you like to photograph?" Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen before. People mostly, candid moments, the way someone's face changes when they laugh, or the gesture someone makes when they think no one is watching. She paused, looking at me with new interest. "You'd be a good subject, actually. You have expressive hands." I felt that flutter in my stomach again, the same one I'd felt when she first said my name. I don't think I'm very photogenic. Everyone thinks that. But photography isn't about being conventionally attractive. It's about capturing something true. She tilted her head, studying me. "You have an honest face." The compliment caught me off guard. I'm not used to women looking at me the way Jacqueline was looking at me, like she was seeing something worth paying attention to. I'm average height, average build, with brown hair that never quite cooperates and a nose that's slightly crooked from a childhood accident. I've never thought of myself as particularly handsome or interesting, but under her gaze I felt different, noticed, seen. That's when I started to realize I was in trouble. It wasn't just her beauty, although she was undeniably beautiful. It was the way she listened when I talked about my work, asking thoughtful questions about joinery techniques and wood selection. It was how she'd bring me a sandwich when I'd been working for hours and forgotten to eat. It was the quiet way she moved through our space, respectful, but not invisible. making it feel more like a home than just a place where two guys lived. But she was Samuel's sister. She was going through a divorce. She was vulnerable in figuring out her life, and I was her temporary roommate who happened to be attracted to her. Getting involved would be complicated at best, destructive at worst. So I started avoiding her. It began subtly. If I heard her in the kitchen, I'd wait until she was done before going in. I'd time my showers for when she was out running errands. I stopped working in the garage when she was home, instead taking projects to a buddy's workshop across town. Samuel noticed first. "You've been scarce lately," he said one evening as we watched a Blazers game. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just busy with work," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. I had taken on more projects, partly to keep myself occupied and partly to have excuses to be away from the apartment. "Jackie asked about you yesterday. Wondered if she'd done something to offend you." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "That you're just antisocial by nature." He grinned, but then his expression turned more serious. "But seriously, man, she's been through a lot. Having a friend around has been good for her." Friend, right. That's what I was supposed to be. But avoiding her became harder as the weeks went on. She'd started cooking dinner sometimes, elaborate meals that filled the apartment with incredible smells. She'd leave a plate for me in the fridge, woj with a note, her handwriting neat and careful. "Thanks for sharing your space. Hope you like Thai food." Jackie. She'd started leaving photography books on the coffee table, open to pages she wanted to share, images of craftspeople at work, close-ups of hands shaping clay or weaving fabric. I'd find myself studying them when she wasn't around, wondering what she saw in them, what drew her to capture those particular moments. And she'd started asking Samuel about me. Casual questions, or so Samuel thought. Where did I grow up? How long had I been woodworking? Was I seeing anyone? That last question made Samuel raise an eyebrow when he relayed it to me. "She seemed pretty interested in your answer," he said with a knowing look. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you haven't dated anyone seriously since Karen Kelly 2 years ago, and that you're probably the most eligible bachelor I know who's completely hopeless with women." "Thanks for that." "Hey, I'm just saying, you're a good guy, Lewis. You deserve someone who appreciates that." The problem was I was starting to think I'd found someone who did. The breaking point came on a Saturday in early November. I'd been at Ralph Davis's workshop all day, helping him finish a kitchen remodel, and came home exhausted and covered in sawdust. The apartment was dark except for the warm glow coming from the living room. I found Jacqueline curled up on the couch with a blanket, laptop open, surrounded by printed photographs. She looked up when I walked in, and her face brightened in a way that made my heart skip. "Hey, stranger," she said softly. "I was wondering when you'd surface. Just getting home from work." I gestured vaguely toward the door, suddenly aware of how I must smell like wood stain and sweat. "I know. Samuel told me you've been putting in long hours." She closed the laptop and gathered the photos into a neat stack. "I was just going through some old work, trying to decide what to do with it." I should have said goodnight and headed to my room. Should have maintained the distance I'd been working so hard to create. Instead, I found myself drawn to the couch, curious about the images she'd been studying. "Can I see?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, making room for me on the couch. Not too close, but close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something light and citrusy. The photographs were stunning, black and white portraits, mostly, but also street scenes and landscapes. There was one of an elderly man's hands as he repaired a violin, the concentration on his weathered face capturing decades of practiced skill. Another showed a young mother laughing as her toddler reached for soap bubbles, joy and love radiating from every line of her expression. "These are incredible," I said and meant it. "You have a real gift." She was quiet for a moment, studying my face as I looked through the images. "You think so? Really?" "Really. These aren't just pictures. They're stories. You can see the person behind the camera cares about the subjects." Something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "Brandon used to say they were sentimental, too emotional to be commercially viable." Brandon was an idiot. The words came out more forcefully than I'd intended, and Jacqueline's eyes widened in surprise. Then she smiled, the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her since she'd arrived. Thank you, she said quietly. I needed to hear that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, me looking through her photographs, her watching me look at them. It felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with physical proximity. She was sharing something precious with me, trusting me with work that meant everything to her. I've been thinking about getting back into it seriously, she said eventually. Photography, I mean. Maybe trying to build a portfolio, see if I can get some freelance work. You should, these are professional quality. Better than professional quality. She turned to face me more fully, tucking one leg under herself on the couch. Would you let me photograph you sometime? I meant what I said about you being a good subject. The question caught me off guard. I don't know, I'm not really comfortable being the center of attention. That's exactly why you'd be perfect. The best portraits happen when people forget about the camera. She leaned forward slightly, enthusiasm lighting up her features. I'd love to capture you working. There's something beautiful about watching someone create something with their hands. I found myself nodding before I'd fully processed the decision. Okay, yeah, I'd like that. Really? Her smile was radiant. Thank you, Lua. This means more to me than you know. That's when I realized how close we'd gotten during the conversation. Somehow, while looking at her photographs and talking about her work, the careful distance I'd been maintaining had evaporated. Our knees were almost touching. I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could count her eyelashes if I wanted to, and I could tell from the way she was looking at me that she was aware of it too. The moment stretched between us, full of possibility and danger. I could feel myself leaning toward her, drawn by something stronger than logic or self-preservation. Her lips parted slightly, and I thought I saw her eyes flutter closed. Then I heard Samuel's key in the front door. I jerked back so quickly I nearly knocked over the stack of photographs. Jacqueline blinked, looking dazed and slightly hurt by my sudden retreat. I should get cleaned up, I said, standing abruptly. Long day. Louis, wait. But I was already heading toward my room, my heart pounding and my hands shaking slightly. Behind me, I heard Samuel's cheerful voice greeting his sister, asking about her day. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. What had I almost done? What had we almost done? This was exactly why I'd been avoiding her. Because when I was around Jacqueline, my carefully constructed boundaries crumbled like sandcastles at high tide. The next morning, I left the apartment before either of them woke up, heading to a coffee shop across town where I could think clearly. I ordered a large black coffee and sat by the window, watching Portland wake up around me. I needed to figure out what I was doing. Jacqueline was Samuel's sister, going through a difficult divorce, staying in our apartment temporarily while she rebuilt her life. Getting involved with her would be complicated for everyone. It would change the dynamic between Samuel and me. It could hurt Jacqueline if things didn't work out. It could hurt me too if I let myself fall for someone who might leave as soon as she got back on her feet. But sitting there in that coffee shop, watching the morning light filter through the windows, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at my hands while I worked, the careful attention she paid when I explained a joinery technique, the way her whole face lit up when she talked about photography. I couldn't stop thinking about how right it felt to sit beside her on the couch, sharing something that mattered to both of us. My phone buzzed with a text from Samuel. Jackie's making breakfast. Where are you? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Work stuff. Back later. Another buzz. Everything okay? You seemed weird last night. I turned off my phone without answering. I spent the day at Ralph's shop working on a bookshelf commission and trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of measuring, cutting, sanding. Ralph, who's been like a mentor to me since I started woodworking, noticed my distraction. Woman troubles? He asked during our lunch break, his weathered face creased with knowing amusement. Ralph is in his 60s, with gray hair and hands that tell the story of 40 years working with wood. He's been married to his wife Sandra Hall for 35 years. And they still look at each other like newlyweds. Something like that, I admitted. Want to talk about it? I found myself telling him the whole story, about Jacqueline showing up at our apartment, about the conversations in the garage, about the way I felt when she looked at my work with genuine interest and appreciation. about the moment on the couch the night before, and how terrified I was of what might have happened if Samuel hadn't come home. Ralph listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small gestures of understanding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, running his thumb along the edge of a piece of maple he'd been shaping. You know, he said finally, Sandra was my best friend's little sister when I first met her. I looked up in surprise. Really? Mm-hmm. Pete Davis and I had been friends since high school. Sandra was 2 years younger, just starting college when I was finishing up my carpentry apprenticeship. He smiled at the memory. Prettiest girl I'd ever seen, and smart as a whip, but she was Pete's baby sister. You know, off limits. What happened? I spent about 6 months being noble and keeping my distance. Meanwhile, Sandra was dating other guys, and I was miserable watching it happen. He set down the piece of wood and looked at me directly. Finally, Pete cornered me one day and asked why I was being such an idiot. He knew? Of course he knew. Sandra had been asking about me, just like it sounds like this Jacqueline's been asking about you. Pete said he'd rather see his sister with someone he trusted and respected than watch her end up with some random guy who might not treat her right. Ralph's words stayed with me as I drove home that evening. The apartment was quiet when I walked in, just the soft sound of music coming from the kitchen. I followed the sound and found Jacqueline at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. She looked up when I entered, and I saw uncertainty in her expression, like she wasn't sure what to expect from me after the previous night. Hi, she said softly. I made soup, tomato basil. I thought you might be hungry when you got home. The simple kindness of it, the way she'd thought about me while I was gone, made my chest tight. That's really nice of you. Thank you. Samuel's working late, so it's just us. She turned back to the stove, but I could see tension in her shoulders. I hope that's okay. I could have made an excuse, could have said I was tired and taken my soup to my room, could have maintained the distance that was probably safer for both of us. Instead, I said, more than okay. Can I help with anything? She glanced at me over her shoulder and I saw relief in her eyes. Could you grab some bowls? And there's fresh bread in the oven. We moved around the kitchen together with surprising ease, like we'd done this 100 times before. She ladled soup into bowls while I sliced the bread, still warm from the oven. We sat at the small dining table Samuel and I had built when we first moved in, the one that had seemed perfectly adequate for 2 guys but somehow felt more intimate with just the 2 of us. This is incredible, I said after my first spoonful. The soup was rich and complex, with herbs I couldn't identify, and a depth of flavor that spoke of hours of careful preparation. Thank you, cooking helps me think. She broke off a piece of bread, not quite meeting my eyes. I've been doing a lot of thinking today. About what? She was quiet for a moment, considering her words. About last night, about what almost happened. My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. Jackie, let me finish, please. She looked up at me then, and I saw determination in her expression alongside the vulnerability. I know this is complicated. I know I'm in a weird place in my life, and you're Samuel's best friend, and I'm living in your apartment. I know there are a dozen reasons why getting involved would be a bad idea. I set down my spoon, my heart starting to race. But I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time, maybe ever. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. And I think maybe you might feel something too. The honesty in her words took my breath away. Here was this incredible woman, brave enough to put herself out there despite everything she'd been through, everything she was still going through. I do, I said quietly. Feel something, I mean. But Jackie, you're going through a divorce. You're figuring out what comes next in your life. The last thing you needed is, don't tell me what I need. There was steel in her voice now, the same strength I'd glimpsed when she talked about her photography. I've had enough of people telling me what I need, what's best for me, what I should want. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. What I need is to make my own choices. What I need is to trust my own instincts for once, instead of letting fear make decisions for me. I stared at her, seeing her fully for the first time. Not as Samuel's vulnerable sister or the woman recovering from a bad marriage, but as Jacqueline, strong, intelligent, beautiful Jacqueline who knew her own mind and wasn't afraid to speak it. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying I like you, Luis Ruiz. I like the way you listen when I talk about photography. I like watching you work, seeing the care you put into everything you create. I like that you're kind without making a big deal about it, that you're thoughtful and funny and real. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I'm saying I'd like to see where this goes, if you're brave enough to find out with me. The touch of her fingers sent electricity up my arm. I looked down at our hands, hers small and soft against mine, and thought about Ralph's story, about choices and chances, and the difference between being noble and being afraid. What about Samuel? I asked. What about him? He's my best friend, and your brother. This could complicate things. She was quiet for a moment, considering. It could, or it could be the best thing that ever happened to all of us. She squeezed my fingers gently. Samuel wants me to be happy, Louis, and he thinks the world of you. I think he'd be more upset if we both ended up miserable because we were too scared to try him. I thought about that, about the conversations Samuel and I had had over the years about relationships and taking chances, about how he'd always encouraged me to put myself out there, to stop being so cautious about everything. And the divorce? I asked, the fact that you're still technically married? The papers were finalized last week, she said quietly. I got the call from my lawyer on Thursday. I'm officially a free woman. Something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Why didn't you say anything? I was waiting for the right moment, and honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt about it yet. Relief mostly, but also uncertainty about what comes next. She looked at me with those honest brown eyes. I think maybe you could be part of what comes next, if you want to be. I turned my hand palm up, interlacing our fingers properly. Her hand fit perfectly in mine, like it belonged there. I want to be, I said. I've wanted to be since the day you walked into my workshop and asked about the dining table. Her smile was radiant, transforming her whole face. Really? Really, I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it was too complicated, too risky. But sitting here with you, holding your hand, it doesn't feel complicated at all. She laughed, a sound of pure joy that made my heart soar. So what do we do now? Now we finish this incredible soup you made, and then maybe we sit on the couch and you show me more of your photographs, and we see what happens. Just like that? I brought her hand to my lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. Just like that. We finished dinner talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her plans to start freelancing, about the portfolio she wanted to build. I told her about the furniture commission I'd been working on, about the client who wanted a custom entertainment center that was proving more challenging than I'd anticipated. It felt natural, easy in a way I hadn't expected. Like we'd been having conversations like this for years instead of weeks. After we cleaned up the dishes, we settled on the couch with her laptop and the stack of photographs from the night before. This time, there was no careful distance between us. She curled up against my side, her head resting on my shoulder as we looked through her work together. This one's my favorite, she said, showing me a portrait of an elderly woman laughing, her face creased with joy and wisdom. Her name was Karen Lewis. I met her at a farmer's market in Seattle. She was selling vegetables from her garden, and something about her just drew me in. What's her story? She was a teacher for 40 years, never married, never had kids, but she said she had thousands of children over the decades. She told me that every student who walked into her classroom became part of her family. Jacqueline traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. She said the secret to a happy life was paying attention to the small moments of beauty that happen every day. I thought about that as I looked at the image, at the way Jacqueline had captured not just the woman's appearance, but her essence, her spirit. Is that what you try to do with your photography? Capture those small moments? I try to. I think that's what drew me to it in the first place. The idea that you could freeze a single instant and show people something they might have missed on Star Wars. She tilted her head to look up at me. What drew you to woodworking? I considered the question, running my free hand through her hair without thinking about it. She made a soft sound of contentment and settled more comfortably against me. I think it's the permanence of it, I said eventually. In a world where everything feels temporary, disposable, there's something satisfying about creating something that will last. A table that a family will gaur around for decades. A bookshelf that will hold someone's favorite stories for generations. That's beautiful, she murmured. I never thought about it that way. What way? Photography captures moments, but they're gone as soon as they happen. What you create lasts. She was quiet for a moment. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to both, the temporary and the permanent. We talked until nearly midnight, sharing stories and dreams and fears. She told me about growing up as the older sister, always feeling responsible for taking care of everyone else. I told her about losing my dad when I was 16, how woodworking had helped me process the grief and find a sense of purpose. When Samuel came home around 12:30, he found us asleep on the couch, her head on my chest and my arm around her shoulders. I woke up to the sound of his key in the lock, blinking in confusion for a moment before remembering where I was. Jacqueline stirred against me, making a small sound of protest as consciousness returned. Samuel stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with raised eyebrows but no apparent surprise. Well, he said quietly, a grin spreading across his face, it's about time. Jacqueline sat up, running a hand through her hair self-consciously. Samuel, we were just, relax, sis, I'm not going to give you a hard time. He dropped his keys on the counter and looked between us with obvious amusement. Though I have to say, Louis, your subtle approach to courtship needs work. Avoiding someone for weeks isn't exactly smooth. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. You knew? Dude, I've known you for 8 years. You think I couldn't tell you were falling for my sister? He shook his head in mock disappointment. And Jackie, you weren't exactly subtle either. Where does Louis work? What kind of music does Louis like? Has Louis ever been married? Jacqueline buried her face in her hands, groaning. Was I really that obvious? Painfully so, both of you. Samuel headed toward his room, pausing at the hallway entrance. For what it's worth, I think you're perfect for each other. Just try to keep the PDA to a minimum when I'm around, okay? After he disappeared down the hall, Jacqueline and I looked at each other and burst into laughter. Well, that went better than expected, she said. Did you really ask him all those questions about me? Maybe a few. She bit her lip, looking embarrassed. In my defense, I was trying to be subtle. Subtle like a freight train, I teased, pulling her back against my side. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, processing the evening's revelations. Everything had changed between us in the span of a few hours, but it felt right, natural, like we'd finally stopped fighting something that was always meant to happen. I should probably go to bed, Jacqueline said eventually, though she made no move to get up. Probably, I agreed, not loosening my hold on her. This is nice, though. Very nice. She tilted her head up to look at me, and I saw something new in her expression. Not just affection or attraction, but trust. Like she was finally allowing herself to believe that this could be real, that I wasn't going to disappear or change my mind. Louis? Yeah? Thank you for being patient with me, for waiting until I was ready to be honest about what I wanted. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me. She did eventually go to her room that night, but not before we made plans for the next day. She wanted to photograph me working, and I had a commission piece that needed finishing. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to combine our interests. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, eager to see her again. I found her in the kitchen, making coffee, already dressed and with her camera bag slung over her shoulder. Good morning, she said, smiling in a way that made my heart skip. Ready to be my subject? As ready as I'll ever be. We headed out to the garage where I had a rocking chair in various stages of completion. It was a complex piece with curved runners and intricate spindle work that required careful attention to detail. Just work like you normally would, Jacqueline said, adjusting her camera settings. Pretend I'm not here. That proved to be impossible. I was hyper-aware of her presence, of the soft click of the camera shutter, of the way she moved around me to capture different angles. But after the first few minutes, I began to relax into the familiar rhythm of the work. I was using a spokes halve to shape one of the chair's arms, taking thin curls of wood with each careful stroke. The tool required a delicate touch, just enough pressure to remove material without gouging or tearing the grain. Beautiful, I heard Jacqueline murmur, and I wasn't sure if she was talking about the woodwork or something else. I glanced up to find her crouched a few feet away, camera raised, completely absorbed in what she was doing. There was an intensity to her focus that reminded me of how I felt when I was deep in a project. That sense of everything else falling away except the work at hand. "Can I see?" I asked during a break. She hesitated for a moment, then turned the camera's display toward me. The image on the screen took my breath away. It showed my hands holding the spokes have, wood curls scattered on the workbench. But somehow she'd captured suya, something more than just the physical action. There was artistry in the composition, emotion in the lighting. "Jackie, this is incredible." "You think so?" She looked at the image critically. "I'm still getting used to working with natural light in here." "It's perfect. You made what I do look like art." "What you do is art," she said simply. "I'm just documenting it." We worked together for the next few hours, falling into an easy rhythm. She'd photograph while I shaped and sanded and assembled, occasionally asking questions about techniques or tools. It felt like collaboration in a way I'd never experienced before. 4. Two different art forms complementing each other. Around noon, Samuel appeared in the doorway with sandwiches and cold drinks. "Thought you might be getting hungry," he said, setting the food on a clear section of workbench. "Thanks, man. This is really nice of you." "Don't mention it. Besides, I wanted to see how the photo shoot was going." He looked at the camera in Jacqueline's hands with interest. "Can we see some of the shots?" Jacqueline glanced at me for permission, and I nodded. She scrolled through the images, showing us her work from the morning. Samuel whistled low in appreciation. "Jackie, these are amazing. You should submit these somewhere, a magazine or something." "You think they're good enough?" "Good enough. They're incredible. Right, Louis?" I was studying one particular image, a close-up of my hands as I used a chisel to clean up a joint. The focus was perfect, the lighting dramatic, and somehow she'd captured the concentration and care that went into even the smallest details of the work. "They're more than good enough," I said. "They're professional quality. Better than most of the stuff I see in woodworking magazines." Jacqueline's face lit up with pride and excitement. "Really? You're not just saying that?" "I would never just say that about something this important to you." She looked at the images again, but this time I could see her viewing them with new eyes. Not as someone hoping they might be good, but as someone beginning to recognize their own talent. "I should put together a portfolio," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe reach out to some local magazines, see if anyone's looking for freelance photographers." "You absolutely should," Samuel said. "And if you need references or recommendations, I know people in marketing who might be able to help." Over lunch, we talked about practical next steps. Jacqueline had been living off savings since her divorce, but she'd need to start generating income soon. Photography could be a path forward, but it would take time to build a client base. "What if you started with local businesses?" I suggested. "Restaurants, shops, artisans, people who need professional photos for websites and marketing materials." "That's a great idea," Samuel agreed. "There's a whole community of small business owners who can't afford big marketing agencies but still need quality photography." Jacqueline was taking notes on her phone, excitement growing as we brainstormed possibilities. I could do a series on local craftspeople, showcase different trades and skills, maybe pitch it as a feature story to Portland Monthly or one of the other regional magazines. "With Louis as your first subject," Samuel said with a grin. "If he's willing." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm willing to be whatever you need me to be." The words came out more loaded with meaning than I'd intended, and I saw understanding flash in her eyes. This wasn't just about photography anymore. It was about building something together, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. That afternoon, after Samuel left to run errands, Jacqueline and I continued working together in the garage. But the dynamic had shifted slightly. There was more touching now, casual brushes of hands as she adjusted my position for a shot, her palm resting on my shoulder as she showed me an image. "I have an idea," she said during a break, lowering her camera. "What if we documented the entire process of building something, from raw lumber to finished piece? Like a time lapse? More than that, a story, the vision, the planning, the setbacks, the problem solving, all the human elements that go into creating something beautiful." She was getting animated as the idea took shape. We could pitch it as a series, different craftspeople, different projects. I could see it taking shape in my mind the way she described it. Not just glamour shots of finished work, but the real process, the mistakes and corrections, the moments of frustration and breakthrough. I love it, I said. When do we start? How about now? What's the next piece you're planning to build? I thought about my commission list, the projects I had lined up for the coming weeks. I've got an order for a dining table, walnut with a live edge. It's for a couple celebrating their 25th anniversary. Perfect. Can you walk me through your process, from selecting the wood to final delivery? I spent the next hour explaining how I approached a major piece like that. The initial consultation with clients, understanding their needs and preferences, sourcing the right lumber, planning the joinery, accounting for wood movement and seasonal changes. Jacqueline listened with the same focused attention she brought to her photography, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes. I found myself opening up about aspects of my work I rarely discussed, the creative decisions and technical challenges that made each piece unique. You really love what you do, she observed. I do. It took me a while to figure out that this was my calling, but now I can't imagine doing anything else. What did you do before? I was in business school, actually, following my mom's advice about having a stable career. I laughed at the memory. I was miserable, spent more time in the wood shop than in class, and finally realized I was studying the wrong thing. When did you know? Senior year. I was supposed to be writing my thesis on market analysis or something equally soul-crushing, but instead I was building a hope chest for my girlfriend at the time. I remember standing in the shop at 2 a.m, putting the final coat of finish on this piece I'd been working on for months, and thinking, Chloe, this is what I want to do with my life. What happened to the girlfriend? Karen Kelly. She didn't understand why I wanted to throw away my education to become a carpenter. We broke up a few months after graduation. I shrugged. Probably for the best. If someone can't support your dreams, they're not the right person for you. Jacqueline was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if she was thinking about her ex-husband, about the dreams he'd convinced her to abandon. I'm sorry that happened to you, she said finally, but I'm glad you followed your instincts. Me too, even though it was scary at first. Not having a traditional career path. Scary how? Financial insecurity mostly. My mom was convinced I'd end up broke and homeless. It took a few years to build a steady client base, and there were times when I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But you stuck with it. I stuck with it, and eventually I realized that doing work you love, even if it's not always easy or predictable, is better than being miserable in a job that pays well but crushes your soul. She nodded slowly, and I could see her processing the parallel to her own situation. I think I'm just starting to understand that. It's never too late to change course. Look at you. You're already taking the steps to rebuild your career in photography. With your help. You're doing the work. I'm just providing moral support and a willing subject. She smiled, reaching out to touch my arm. You're providing more than that. You're believing in me when I'm still learning to believe in myself. The sincerity in her voice made my chest tight with emotion. I covered her hand with mine, marveling at how natural it felt to touch her, to offer comfort and encouragement. I do believe in you, I said. Your talent is obvious to anyone who looks at your work. But more than that, I believe in your strength, your determination to build the life you want. Even though I'm a mess right now, you're not a mess. You're someone who's been through a difficult experience and is choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck. That takes courage. She was quiet for a moment, looking down at our joined hands. I haven't felt courageous lately. Mostly I've felt scared and uncertain. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Is that what you're doing with me? Being courageous despite being scared? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What makes you think I'm scared? Because this is new territory for both of us. Because there's a lot at stake. Because caring about someone always involves risk. She looked up at me with those honest brown eyes. I'm terrified, Louis. Terrified of getting hurt again. Of hurting you. Of messing up what we're building. Her vulnerability took my breath away. Here was this incredible woman, brave enough to admit her fears while still choosing to move forward. I'm scared too, I admitted. Scared of not being enough, of disappointing you, of losing what we have before we have even figured out what it is. So what do we do with the fear? I thought about the conversations I'd had with Ralph over the years about love and risk and the courage it takes to open your heart to another person. We acknowledge it, and I said, we don't let it make our decisions for us, but we don't pretend it's not there either. And we promise to be honest with each other, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Especially then. She leaned forward and kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was our first real kiss, and it felt like a beginning and a homecoming all at once. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. I'm really glad you stopped avoiding me. I laughed, remembering the weeks of careful distance, the elaborate strategies I developed to minimize contact. I'm really glad you called me on it. I almost didn't. I almost convinced myself I was imagining the connection between us. What changed your mind? That night on the couch looking at my photographs with you, the way you saw them, really saw them, and understood what I was trying to capture. She pulled back to look at me directly. No one had ever looked at my work like that before. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. You do matter. Your work matters. Your dreams matter. So do yours. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning our documentation project, sketching out ideas for how to tell the story of creating something from start to finish. Jacqueline had a natural instinct for narrative, understanding how to structure a visual story that would engage viewers and reveal the artistry in everyday craftsmanship. By evening, we had the framework for what could become a compelling series of articles and photo essays. More than that, we had a shared project, something we could build together that combined our individual talents. When Samuel came home for dinner, he found us at the kitchen table surrounded by sketches and notes, deep in animated discussion about lighting techniques and shooting angles. You two look like you're plotting something, he observed, grabbing a beer from the fridge. We're developing a project, Jacqueline explained, showing him our preliminary plans, a series documenting local craftspeople and their work. Samuel studied our notes with interest. This is really cool. Have you thought about approaching it as a multimedia project? Maybe create a website or blog to accompany the print articles? That's a great idea, I said. Jacqueline could handle the photography and writing, and I could build the website. You know web design? Jacqueline asked, surprised. I taught myself a few years ago when I needed a site for my business. I'm not a professional, but I can put together something functional and attractive. See, Samuel said with satisfaction, you two are perfect for each other. Complementary skills, shared vision, mutual support. It's like a business partnership and a romance rolled into one. Jacqueline and I exchanged a look, both of us smiling at his enthusiasm. It was true that we seemed to fit together naturally, both personally and professionally, but it was still early days, and we were both cautious about moving too fast or putting too much pressure on what was developing between us. That night, after Samuel went to bed, Jacqueline and I found ourselves back on the couch. This time, there was no pretense of looking at photographs or discussing work. We were simply enjoying each other's company, talking about everything and nothing. Can I ask you something? She said, curled up against my side. Anything. What made you finally stop avoiding me? Was it just the conversation we had at dinner, or was there something else? I thought about it, tracing patterns on her arm with my fingertips. It was a lot of things. The dinner conversation was part of it, but mostly it was realizing that I was letting fear make my decisions instead of following my heart. What were you afraid of? All the usual things. Getting hurt, hurting you, complicating things with Samuel, but also something more specific. I paused, trying to find the right words. I was afraid that I wasn't what you needed right now, that you needed time and space to figure out your life, not another complication. And what changed your mind? You did, the way you told me that you wanted to make your own choices, trust your own instincts. I realized I was being paternalistic, deciding what was best for you instead of letting you decide for yourself. She was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. Thank you for that, for recognizing it and changing course. Thank you for calling me out on it. I almost didn't. Part of me was tempted to just accept that you weren't interested and try to move on. The thought of her giving up on us before we'd even begun made my stomach clench. I'm really glad you didn't. Me too. We talked until late again, sharing more stories from our pasts, our hopes for the future, our fears and dreams and everything in between. I learned that she'd always wanted to travel, to document different cultures and communities through her photography. She learned that I'd always dreamed of teaching woodworking, maybe opening a school where people could learn traditional techniques. We could combine those dreams, she said thoughtfully, travel to different places, document traditional crafts and the people who practice them. Create a book or exhibition about the artistry that exists in cultures around the world. The idea was intoxicating, the possibility of combining our passions in a way that could take us anywhere, show us everything. But it also felt far away, like something that might happen someday if we were lucky and everything worked out perfectly. That sounds incredible, I said. Maybe someday. Why not sooner? What's stopping us? I thought about the practical considerations. Money, logistics, the need to establish ourselves professionally before taking on something so ambitious. But underneath those practical concerns was something else. The fear that planning too far into the future might jinx what we were building in the present. I guess I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, I said carefully. We're just starting to figure out what this is between us. She was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if I'd disappointed her with my caution. You're right, she said finally. I'm getting carried away with possibilities. It's just that I haven't felt this excited about the future in a long time. I haven't either, and I love that we're dreaming together. I just want to make sure we're building something solid before we start making plans that depend on us being together long term. That makes sense. I appreciate you being the practical one while I get swept up in the romance of it all. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I love your romantic side. I just want to make sure we have a strong foundation to build those dreams on. So what does that look like? Building a strong foundation? It was a good question, one I'd been thinking about since we'd first acknowledged our feelings for each other. I think it means taking time to really get to know each other. Not just the surface stuff, but the deeper things. How we handle conflict, how we support each other through difficult times, how we make decisions together. And it means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. She tilted her head to look at me. Are you being honest with me now about wanting to take things slow? What do you mean? I mean, is this really about building a foundation, or are you having second thoughts about us? The question caught me off guard, and I realized that my caution might be coming across as uncertainty about my feelings for her. No second thoughts, I said firmly. If anything, I'm more sure about you every day. That's actually part of why I want to be careful. What I feel for you is real and important, and I don't want to mess it up by rushing or making assumptions. Relief flickered across her features. Okay, I just needed to hear that. What about you? Any second thoughts? None, well, maybe some moments of panic about how fast everything is changing, but no doubts about wanting to be with you. What kind of panic? She was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and think about how different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was married and living in Seattle and convinced that photography was just a hobby I'd never be good enough to pursue professionally. Now I'm divorced and living in Portland and falling for my brother's best friend and planning a career as a freelance photographer. That's a lot of change. It's everything changing at once. And most of the time, it feels right and exciting and like I'm finally becoming who I'm supposed to be. But sometimes it's overwhelming, and I worry that I'm making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. I understood what she meant. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind for both of us, feelings developing quickly and plans forming before we'd fully processed what was happening. What would logic tell you to do? I asked. Logic would tell me to focus on getting my career established before getting involved with anyone. To take time to figure out who I am as a single person before trying to be part of a couple again. And what does emotion tell you? She smiled, reaching up to touch my face. Emotion tells me that life is short and unpredictable, and when you find something real and beautiful, you don't let it go just because the timing isn't perfect. What do you think the right answer is? I think maybe there isn't a right answer. I think maybe we just have to trust ourselves in each regard and be willing to adjust course if we need to. I nodded, feeling some of my own tension ease. That sounds reasonable. We don't have to have everything figured out right now. No, we don't. We just have to be honest about what we're feeling and what we need, and trust that we can work through whatever challenges come up. That became our approach over the following weeks. We took things day by day, checking in with each other regularly, being honest about our feelings and concerns as they arose. We spent time together both as a couple and as collaborators, working on our documentation project, while also exploring the growing connection between us. The photography project became a natural way to deepen our relationship while also building something meaningful together. We started with the walnut dining table I'd been commissioned to build, documenting every step from selecting the lumber to final delivery. Jacqueline approached it with the same artistic eye she brought to all her photography, but she also developed a genuine understanding of the craft itself. She learned to recognize quality in wood grain, to appreciate the precision required for complex joinery, to see the artistry in techniques that might look mundane to an untrained eye. Look at this, she said one afternoon, showing me a close-up shot of a dovetail joint I just finished cutting. The way the wood fibers catch the light, the perfect fit between the pieces. It's like a puzzle that only has one solution. That's exactly what it is, I said, pleased by her insight. And if you cut it wrong, there's no hiding the mistake. No Photoshop for woodworking. No Photoshop for woodworking. She documented not just the technical aspects of the work, but the human elements as well. The concentration on my face as I marked out measurements. The satisfaction when a difficult joint came together perfectly. The frustration when a piece of wood didn't behave as expected and I had to problem solve on the fly. You make different faces when you're working, she told me one day. There's your measuring face, which is very serious and focused. Your cutting face, which is intense but calm, and your sanding face, which is almost meditative. I have a sanding face? You do, your shoulders relax and your breathing gets deeper. It's like you're in a trance. I'd never thought about the physical aspects of my work, the way my body and mind responded to different tasks. But as Jacqueline pointed it out, I began to notice it myself, becoming more conscious of the rhythm and flow of my process. The project also gave us a reason to spend extended time together, without the pressure of formal dates or relationship milestones. We were working toward a common goal, which created natural opportunities for conversation, collaboration, and quiet companionship. Samuel was supportive and encouraging, offering suggestions and feedback without being intrusive. He seemed genuinely happy to see both his sister and his best friend finding happiness together, and he made it clear that he approved of the relationship. You know, I always hoped you two would hit it off, he told me one evening while Jacqueline was out running errands. I just didn't expect it to take a crisis to make it happen. You hoped we'd hit it off? Come on, man, you're both creative, thoughtful people who care about quality and craftsmanship. You both value authenticity over superficial stuff, and you're both way too picky about relationships, which meant you needed someone really special to break through your defenses. I thought about that, about the way Jacqueline had indeed broken through defenses I hadn't even realized I'd built. Do you think we're good together? I think you're great together. She's happier than I've seen her in years, and you're more relaxed and open than you've been since I've known you. More relaxed? Dude, you used to be so careful about everything. Every decision analyzed from 12 different angles. Every risk weighed and measured. With Jackie, you're more spontaneous, more willing to go with your gut. He was right. I had always been cautious, methodical in my approach to life and relationships. But with Jacqueline, I found myself taking chances, following instincts, trusting feelings over analysis. Is that good or bad? It's good. It means you trust her enough to let your guard down. And it means she brings out a side of you that was probably always there, but never had a reason to emerge. Our first real test as a couple came about a month after we'd acknowledged our feelings for each other. Jacqueline received a call from a magazine editor who'd seen some of her work online and wanted to discuss a potential assignment. The assignment was a dream opportunity, a photo essay about traditional crafts in rural Oregon, exactly the kind of work she'd always wanted to do. But it would require 2 weeks of travel, visiting different communities and documenting various artisans. I want to take it, she told me after explaining the details, but I'm worried about the timing. We're just getting started, and I don't want to disappear for 2 weeks when we're still figuring things out. We were sitting in the garage, taking a break from photographing my work on the dining table. The commission was nearly complete, just final sanding and finishing left to do. You should absolutely take it, I said without hesitation. This is exactly what you've been working toward. But what about us? What about the project we're working on? Us will be here when you get back, and the project can wait, or I can work on other pieces while you're gone. She looked uncertain, torn between professional opportunity and personal concerns. 2 weeks is a long time when a relationship is this new. I understood her worry. We've been spending almost every day together, building intimacy through shared time and experiences. 2 weeks apart would be a significant interruption to that process. But I also knew how important this opportunity was for her career, for her confidence as a professional photographer. Jackie, this is your chance to prove to yourself that you can do this work at a professional level. You can't pass that up because you're worried about us. What if things change while I'm gone? What if the distance makes us realize this isn't as real as we thought? The vulnerability in her voice made my chest ache. She was still scared of losing what we'd built, still uncertain about trusting her own judgment when it came to relationships. Then we'll deal with that if it happens, I said gently, but I don't think it will. What we have isn't dependent on constant proximity. It's deeper than that. How can you be so sure? Because I know how I feel about you. 2 weeks isn't going to change that. If anything, missing you will probably make me more certain. She was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. What if I miss you too much? What if I can't focus on the work because I'm thinking about you? Then you call me. We'll talk every day if you want to. And if it gets too difficult, you come home early. But I don't think that will happen either. I think once you are out there doing what you love, you will be exactly where you need to be. She looked at me with something like wonder in her eyes. You really believe in me that much? I believe in you completely. Your talent, your professionalism, your ability to handle whatever challenges come up, even though I'm scared. Especially because you're scared. Fear means it matters to you. She leaned over and kissed me, soft and grateful and full of affection. Thank you for supporting this even though it means time apart. Thank you for trusting me enough to share your fears instead of just turning down the opportunity. She took the assignment, and we spent the next few days before her departure finishing up our documentation of the dining table project. I worked longer hours to complete the piece while she was still there to photograph the final steps, and she compiled the images and notes we'd gathered into a preliminary portfolio. The night before she left, we sat on the couch looking through the completed photo series. It was impressive work, telling a complete story from raw lumber to finished furniture, capturing both the technical skill and artistic vision involved in the process. This is really good, I said, studying the images with fresh eyes. Professional quality, compelling narrative, beautiful composition. You should be proud of this. We should be proud of this. It was a collaboration. You did the hard work. I just provided the subject matter. You provided much more than that. You taught me about the craft, helped me understand what to look for, what moments were worth capturing. We'd created something meaningful together, proof that our individual talents could combine into something greater than the sum of their parts. It felt like a good foundation for whatever came next. I'm going to miss you, she said quietly, her head resting on my shoulder. I'm going to miss you too, but I'm also excited for you. This is going to be an incredible experience. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me you'll work on your own projects while I'm gone. Don't just wait for me to come back. Keep creating. Keep building. I promise. What about you? Will you promise me something? What? Promise me you'll trust yourself out there. Trust your instincts, your artistic vision, your ability to connect with people and tell their stories. I promise, Juan. We made love that night for the first time, slow and tender and full of emotion. It felt like a natural progression of everything we'd been building together, a physical expression of the emotional intimacy we'd developed. Afterward, lying in her arms in the dark, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Not just physical satisfaction, but emotional fulfillment, like I'd found the missing piece of myself I hadn't known I was looking for. I love you, I whispered into her hair, the words coming out before I'd consciously decided to say them. She was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if she'd heard me, if I should repeat it or pretend it had never happened. I love you too, she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. I wasn't sure if it was too soon to say it, but I've been feeling it for weeks. How long? Since that first night we talked about our dreams, when you told me about wanting to teach woodworking, the way your face lit up when you talked about sharing knowledge with other people, helping them discover their own creativity. That's when I knew. For me, it was when you showed me your photographs and talked about capturing small moments of beauty, the passion in your voice, the way you saw art in everyday life. I knew I wanted to be part of that vision. We talked quietly until dawn, sharing the story of how we'd fallen in love, the moments and conversations and realizations that had led us to this point. By the time the sun came up, I felt more connected to her than I'd ever felt to another person. She left that morning with promises to call every day and text regularly. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye at security, and watched her disappear into the terminal with a mixture of pride and longing. The first few days without her were harder than I'd expected, not just because I missed her company, but because her absence made me realize how much my daily routine had come to revolve around our shared time. The garage felt empty without her presence, the apartment too quiet without her laughter. But I kept my promise to keep working. I started a new commission, a bookshelf for a retired librarian who wanted something special to house her collection of first editions. It was a complex piece, requiring careful consideration of weight distribution and climate control to protect the valuable books. I also began planning our next documentation project, researching other craftspeople in the Portland area who might be interested in participating. The idea was growing beyond just my work to encompass a broader exploration of traditional skills and contemporary artisanship. Jacqueline called every evening, sharing stories from her travels and the people she was meeting. Her excitement was infectious, and I could hear the confidence growing in her voice as she described successful shoots and positive interactions with her subjects. I met this amazing potter today, she told me during one call. She's been working with clay for 40 years, and she still gets excited about every piece she creates. She reminded me of you, actually. The same dedication to craft, the same joy in the process. Did you get good shots? Incredible shots. I think this might be some of the best work I've ever done. I feel like I'm finally understanding what I'm capable of as a photographer. Her success made me happy in a way that surprised me with its intensity. I realized that her achievements felt like my achievements, that her joy became my joy. It was a level of emotional investment I'd never experienced before, caring about someone else's dreams as much as my own. I'm so proud of you, I told her. I knew you could do this. I couldn't have done it without your support. Knowing you believed in me gave me the confidence to take risks, to trust my instincts. You always had the talent. You just needed to believe in yourself. I'm starting to. And Louis, I can't wait to come home and share all of this with you, to show you the work and plan our next project together. I can't wait either. The 2 weeks passed more quickly than I'd expected, filled with work and planning and daily conversations that kept us connected despite the distance. By the time Jacqueline returned, I was more certain than ever that what we had was real and lasting. She came back transformed, glowing with confidence and excitement about her work. The photographs she'd taken were stunning, capturing not just the technical skill of various craftspeople, but their passion and dedication as well. Look at this, she said, showing me image after image of potters, weavers, blacksmiths, and wood carvers. Each person had such a unique approach, but they all shared that same commitment to excellence, that same love of creating something beautiful with their hands. These are incredible, Jackie. This is going to be an amazing article. Articles, plural. The editor wants to expand it into a series. And she's interested in our documentation project too. She wants to see what we've been working on together. The success of her assignment opened doors for both of us. The magazine wanted to feature our collaborative work, which led to other opportunities and commissions. Within a few months, we had established ourselves as a team, combining woodworking and photography in ways that told compelling stories about craft and creativity. But more importantly, the time apart had proven that our relationship could withstand challenges and distance. We'd maintained our connection through daily communication, and the reunion had been joyful and passionate, confirming that our feelings had only grown stronger. "I have something to tell you," Jacqueline said one evening as we sat in the garage, working on our latest project together. "What's that?" "I've been offered a permanent position with the magazine, staff photographer, with a focus on arts and culture stories." I looked up from the cabinet I was sanding, surprised and pleased. "Jackie, that's amazing." "Congratulations." "Thank you, but there's more. They want me to relocate to their headquarters in San Francisco." The words hit me like a physical blow. San Francisco was 8 hours away, too far for a commuting relationship, too far for the kind of daily collaboration we'd been building. "When?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "They want an answer by the end of the month, and if I say yes, I'd start in January." I set down my sandpaper, needing a moment to process this information. It was an incredible opportunity for her, exactly the kind of position she dreamed of. But it would mean the end of what we'd been building together, both professionally and personally. "What are you thinking?" I asked carefully. "I'm thinking it's a dream job. Steady income, benefits, the chance to work on major stories with a talented team." She paused, studying my face. "But I'm also thinking it would mean leaving you, leaving what we've built together." "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted, excited about the professional opportunity, but devastated at the thought of leaving you behind." I understood her conflict, felt it myself as I tried to weigh her career needs against our relationship. This was exactly the kind of situation I'd feared when we first got together. The possibility that her life would take her in a direction that didn't include me. But I also knew that if I truly loved her, I had to support what was best for her career, even if it meant personal sacrifice. "You should take it," I said, meaning it despite the pain the words caused. "Just like that? Just like that. This is what you've been working toward, Jackie. A chance to do the work you love at the highest level, with security and support and resources you can't get freelancing." "But what about us?" I was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Us will figure it out. Maybe long distance can work. Maybe I can find opportunities in San Francisco too. Maybe we can maintain our collaboration remotely." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You'd really be okay with me leaving?" "I'd be heartbroken," I said honestly. "But I'd also be proud of you for taking the chance. And I'd rather have you pursuing your dreams 8 hours away than staying here and resenting the opportunity you gave up. What if long distance doesn't work? What if this is the end of us?" The possibility made my chest ache, but I forced myself to consider it honestly. "Then we'll have had something beautiful for the time we had it, and we'll both be better people for having loved each other, even if it doesn't last forever." She was crying now, and I moved to hold her, both of us emotional at the prospect of major change. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered against my chest. "You won't lose me. Distance doesn't erase love, and who knows? Maybe this will lead to opportunities neither of us can imagine right now." We talked late into the night about possibilities and logistics, about what a long-distance relationship might look like, and how we could maintain our professional collaboration. It wasn't easy, but we approached it with the same honesty and communication that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. Over the following weeks, as Jacqueline considered her decision, we both did research into the San Francisco area, looking at opportunities and possibilities. I discovered that there was a thriving community of custom furniture makers in the Bay Area, with potential clients who valued handcrafted work and were willing to pay premium prices for quality. "What if we both moved?" I suggested one evening. "What if this is a chance for both of us to expand our horizons?" "You'd really consider leaving Portland? Leaving Samuel and your established client base?" "I'd consider it. For you, for us, for the adventure of building something new together." The idea grew on both of us as we explored it further. San Francisco would offer new markets for my work, different architectural styles and design aesthetics to explore. It would offer Jacqueline not just the magazine job, but access to a larger arts community and more diverse subjects for her photography. Most importantly, it would allow us to continue building our life together instead of trying to maintain it across distance. Are you sure? She asked as we made the final decision. This is a big change, and there's no guarantee it will work out. I'm sure, I said, and I was. What we have is worth the risk. And besides, if it doesn't work out, we can always come back to Portland. She accepted the magazine position, and I began making plans to relocate my business to San Francisco. It was complicated and stressful, involving client transitions, equipment moves, and the search for new workspace. But it was also exciting, the prospect of a new adventure with the woman I loved. Samuel was supportive, though sad to see us both leaving. I'm going to miss having you around, he told me. But I think this is the right move for both of you. You belong together, and you both deserve to chase your dreams wherever they lead. The move happened gradually over several months. Jacqueline started her new job in January, commuting back and forth while I wrapped up projects and prepared for the transition. By spring, we were both established in San Francisco, sharing a small apartment with a view of the bay and workshop space in a converted warehouse south of Market Street. The city challenged us in ways Portland never had. The pace was faster, the competition more intense, the cost of living significantly higher. But it also offered opportunities and inspiration we'd never encountered before. Jacqueline thrived in her new role, producing photo essays that gained national attention and earned her recognition within the industry. I found new clients among tech entrepreneurs and design enthusiasts who appreciated custom furniture and were willing to invest in quality craftsmanship. Our collaboration continued and evolved, adapting to new subjects and environments. We documented urban artisans, immigrant craftspeople preserving traditional techniques, and contemporary artists pushing the boundaries of their mediums. Look at us, Jacqueline said one evening as we walked along the waterfront, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A year ago, I was hiding in my brother's apartment, afraid to call myself a photographer. Now I'm staff at a major magazine, living in one of the most beautiful cities in the world with the man I love. A year ago, I was avoiding you because I was too scared to admit how I felt, I replied. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Do you ever regret it, leaving Portland, taking all these risks? I thought about it, about the comfortable life I'd left behind, the security of established routines and familiar surroundings. Then I looked at Jacqueline, radiant with happiness and confidence, and felt the familiar flutter of love and gratitude that she was mine. Never, I said. Best decision I ever made. That brings us back to where we started, to that moment on the couch when she asked me why I'd been avoiding her. Sitting here now in our San Francisco apartment, 2 years later, I can see how that conversation changed everything for both of us. It was the moment we stopped letting fear make our decisions, the moment we chose honesty over safety, connection over protection, love over logic. Tell me why you keep avoiding me, she'd said, and in answering that question, we'd found our way to each other and to the life we'd built together. Sometimes I think about the alternate version of our story, the one where I kept avoiding her until she gave up and moved on, where we both stayed safe and separate and missed out on everything we could have been together. But then Jacqueline calls my name from the kitchen, asking if I want coffee, and I remember that we chose the brave path instead. We chose each other, chose to build something beautiful together, chose to create a love story worth telling. And every morning when I wake up beside her, every evening when we sit together planning our next project, every moment when she looks at me with those warm brown eyes full of love and partnership, I'm grateful we found the courage to stop avoiding what we both wanted most.